elaborate a little bit on some of the additional reductions that we're taking a look at and identify any gaps and potential resolutions as well. And so I'll turn it over to Steve.
So,
was this in our Dropbox?
No, not yet, no. We just finished it like 5:30, but I'll put a PDF in your Dropbox. Would you like me to do that now? Or?
You don't have to do it now.
Okay.
I'd like to have it.
I will put it in
for reference
Dropbox.
purposes. I didn't, because I've been gone. I didn't know if I missed the sync on it. Or...
No, actually, Steve and I were working on it up to 5:30 today.
Okay.
So this is kind of an update based on the information that I was able to gather at the May Revise conference, as Dr. was mentioned. According to May Revise, the governor has basically projected that he would like to move forward with the local control funding formula.
Of course, not this year.
Unfortunately, there is a lot of resistance, as Mr. Distasso mentioned earlier. It's not a very equitable formula. There's some challenges to implementing it. This is one of those things we have to keep in mind, that the state has been under this current revenue limit system for the last 40 years, since the early 70s. So making such a drastic change to LCFF is not something that would happen in a year. I'd anticipated that it would be moving further along than it is, but there is quite a bit of resistance for a number of reasons. Part of it has to do with the fact that certain districts receive advantages. They receive advantages in terms of their population. They have a high percentage of population that are free and reduced price lunch, English language learners, foster children. Those districts would receive everyone receives a base grant. Those districts that have a higher proportion receive a 35% increase, along with a 50% concentration grant with population over 50%. So if your population of free and reduced English language learners, etc., exceeds 50%, then you get a concentration grant. And so that creates some inequities for districts that don't have that population.
I keep getting my case names wrong here. Didn't the Williams Valenzuela Act, or there was an issue that came up over the state doing this before, where school districts sued the state because of the inequity, and it brought back a more consistent revenue limit application. Isn't this moving away from that very thing?
Yeah, I think you're referring to Serrano versus Priest, and that was a long time ago, and that was a very similar issue of equity. And it seems like it's very hard to come up with the magic bullet that will satisfy everyone, because there's almost 1,000 school districts in the state. The populations, the demographics vary dramatically. Transportation funding varies. Some districts here, just in this county, don't do any transportation. If you're out in a rural area like we are, transportation is a big deal. You need to provide transportation to bring those students in.
So let's go back to, because I think it's important, you brought up the La Cañada issue, and this really impacts districts like La Cañada and ourselves, where you don't have high numbers of population in those districts, so your funding remains basically flat, and all the others go back up to what I want to consider Prop 98 values. So they're still violating Prop 98, okay, which is the law. They're still well below that funding mechanism. And so again, it creates additional inequities. And obviously, I'm not in favor of it for this particular district. If you're in a district, let's say, for example, Palmdale School District, some of the ones down in LA, those districts will have a glut of cash into their district. That to me, obviously, in addition to the categoricals that they already received for those special populations, the EL, LEP, the Title III, EIA type of funding that they currently receive, which they receive more funding than we do already.
So that's sort of the pushback right now is that's the reason that the governor has basically stated that he wants to move forward with this, and now the legislature is kind of looking at this and saying, wait a minute, there's a lot of pushback because of the fact that there's not a level of equity, and there are winners and losers under LCFF. And so given that, we have no choice but to basically continue planning the way we've done in the past with the current revenue limit system. The governor talks about reducing the wall of debt, which is the whole concept of principal apportionment deferrals, and he talks about buying down some of those deferrals, but it's not going to be bought down completely. There are still going to be cash deferrals next year. It got up to as high as 45%. Number is down a little bit from that, but it is expected to continue.
So, Prop 30 sold, when you read the fine print, that it was supposed to cure either the amount of deferral time or the cash amount of the deferral itself. Are we suggesting that despite Prop 30, that neither one of those are going to get fixed, either the amount of time that the deferrals last or the actual amount, dollar value of the deferral, if you know it?
Well, instead of having 45% be cash deferred, it would be more like 30 to 35%. So the amount of deferrals, the deferrals will continue. They won't be as extreme as they've been in years past because of Prop 30 and some additional revenues the state's got. We're not out of this.
And the amount of time that the money is deferred remains the same?
Yes, that's right. And so the third piece on here is a potential new categorical funding source. We haven't had a new categorical program for quite some time. And this is Common Core Standards. And I'll talk a little bit more about this as we move forward. So, if you would please. We've talked about our enrollment as being one of the biggest challenges to our budget. Our P288 came in at 1288, right around where we had anticipated it would be. And so we're still projecting, obviously, about a 35% decline over the last 5 years. That is a dramatic drop in enrollment over a 5-year period. And cannot emphasize the impact that has on such a small school district such as ours. So, we talked about our deficit being right around
This ties back to
$2 billion.
This ties back to the numbers
We started with.
Yeah.
this was the original deficit. not
Just
the
a
ask.
quick preview where we were before.
Right, I'm just trying to get my head around it.
Yeah.
This is the original deficit before the ask list. Just trying to refresh.
Before the ask list and before we reduced that by
Yeah, I
half.
remember. Yeah.
So we're going to go through this quickly.
Yep.
So we talked about there being a $1.2 million gap, assuming we would eliminate our deficit. We talked about having to reduce the number of FTEs as a result of our enrollment decline. We talked about modifying that target and including some additional classified reductions that would be commensurate with the enrollment reductions. So we get to our revised target, which goes down to a little over $700,000. Some actions we've taken to try and mitigate our deficit: yearly retirement incentive program. We have approved a 100% backfill, so there is a net savings there of about $75,000. We've talked about refinancing some debt, which we've done. That helps to offset our deficit further. So our revised target changes down to a little over $600,000.